Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Felipe. We're here in the Global Read webinar series. We are about to begin. Let me just set up our stream so that we can be live on our social media platforms so that people can also join us in there. But we'll begin shortly, so stay with us. Let's see, let's make sure that we are live. Okay, let's see. Sorry about that. Let me just make sure that we're good. All right, I think we are ready to begin. Welcome once again. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us from. We are so excited to be hosting our global read today, Wednesday, September 17th, with Home Inside the Globe, the book by Gail Straub. We have here obviously Gail, the author of the book, and we have also the facilitator, Dr. Janus Adams, who I am happy to introduce. Dr. Janus Adams is an Emmy Award-winning journalist, author, historian, and trailblazer. She originated the role of national arts correspondent for NPR and is the author of 11 books, including Sister Days and the award-winning Black Packs Kids series. Her acclaimed Glory Days reached over 3 million readers through a national partnership with McDonald's and inspired a Warner Music Group concert premiere. In 1990, she founded Harambe, the first national book club for African American literature, reshaping the publishing industry. She holds honorary doctorates from Shaw University and SUNY New Paltz. Dr. Janice, we are so grateful to have you here with us and for you to be the facilitator for this global read. And we welcome you both, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. A quote. Every time I encounter a person or place or idea or value that's different than me, Gail told me, I become more whole. I become more multidimensional. If I stay in the same little familiar cocoon of singular identity, I'm missing out. The more identities I experience and learn from, the richer a human being I am, and that this unity in diversity is the only way forward. Moving us forward today, Gail Straub is the author of 8 books. Her latest is Home Inside the Globe, Embracing Our Human Family. Also among my favorites ever by anyone are her award-winning nature writings, The Ashokan Way, Landscape's Path into Consciousness, with painter and printmaker Kate McLaughlin. Solace and Sanctuary, The Ashokan's Enduring Gifts, and a memoir, Returning to My Mother's Home. By way of context and background, Gail Straub co-founded in 1981 the Empowerment Institute. Whoops. Page doesn't want to turn. Imagine a global initiative for the empowerment of women, which helps women heal from violence, build strong lives, and contribute to their communities. Imagine initiatives have taken root throughout Africa, India, and the Middle East, where they have impacted millions of lives. Preparing for this event, I absolutely fell in love with the Charter for Compassion's origin story. How Karen Armstrong's wish brings us together today. How all the world's words were collected and given to a council of conscience to gift us with our collective story, our need and our aspiration, our sense of compassion. Gail Straub is a woman who's seen the world, been both insider and outsider. She has extended herself to the world, come back with the elixir of our collected questions, questions of understanding, of wisdom, of suffering, of what and how we can learn from one another. And now, with the story she tells from that anointed place, home inside the globe, embracing our family, our human family. Gail Straub, thank you.
Oh, Janice, thank you. That was the most eloquent introduction I've ever gotten. And hello, everyone who's on the call, evening, morning, whatever time it is for you. And I'd like to echo Janice. Thank you so much, Felipe and Lynn and Marilyn and all the amazing team at the Charter for Compassion. Such incredible work. So it's wonderful to be here.
Gail, I'm going to ask you a question. What is compassion? And when in your life have you been its beneficiary?
Oh, that's, of course, the beautiful question given our host today and so much of, I think, so much of Home Inside the Globe. It is, in fact, Janice, about compassion. I think of compassion, that's a big question. And I know you, Dr. Janus Adams, you only ask big questions. So, well, I'll tell you what I feel it is today. And um, perhaps by tomorrow I'd have a different answer. But I think of compassion as an open heart, also a clear mind, the mind free of distraction, perhaps so that the heart can open. And with an open heart, I can include unexpected things, different things, people, places, values. Um, in a way, I could say an open heart is open to diversity, open to surprise, open to growth. And, the book is about, um, uh, for the listeners today, I talk about 12 cultures, and each of those cultures teaches me something different, something outside my comfort zone. And sometimes those things are very difficult. But I say in the book that compassion and empathy is a key aspect of being a global citizen. And so I think maybe the way I could answer your question, Janice, is that to become a full member of the human family requires a compassionate heart because we're going to encounter all kinds of unexpected things.
Thank you. In that spirit, would you read something from Home Inside the Globe for us?
Oh, I would love to. And I selected something very short today. So I took a tiny few little paragraphs from the prologue. And then, because of our host, Charter for Compassion, I wanted to read the last page of the book. So, for those who are on the call today, I'm going to read just a little bit from the prologue, where my calling in life, my Dharma, is put forward. And then I'm going to switch. I'll let you know when I'm switching to sort of fast forward 300 pages to the final page, which takes place in the Medina in Marrakesh, Morocco. But first, just a little glimpse of the prologue. In response, the glimmering globe announces my calling. You shall live, and you shall travel far away from home and all that is familiar, so that you experience the miraculous diversity of the human family. Only by unifying what is familiar to you with all that is different, will you become whole. You will learn this for yourself, but also so that you can teach it to the world. For the world, too, can only complete itself by finding unity within its diversity. With those words, the spirit globe departs as I begin my life on this earth. But I will remain in the womb of the globe for my entire life, journeying through its many portals as I become whole. This is the story of how I followed my calling. This is my love letter to the world. And so then, dear listeners, you go on a journey through 12 cultures: Africa, India, Russia, China, the Middle East, Ireland, Bali, a few others, and you come to the final pages of my book, where you find me back in Morocco, in the Medina, in the old marketplace in Marrakesh, and I'll just read from there. I walk back through the Medina's maze, contemplating the labyrinth of my life. As I return to the market square, where the grand Kutubia greets me, I remember the quiet gardens surrounding the mosque. Sitting under the shade of palm trees, I reflect on how my calling sits at the very center of the labyrinth of my life. And I recognize how this calling to know the globe has been fulfilled by the two core impulses from my mother and father, as well as my empowerment dharma with David, my husband. The three most important people in my life have helped me answer my calling. All my life, I have wanted to know how other people understand the world. What constitutes true wisdom for them? How do they respond to the suffering that is part of every existence? Are the challenges of leading a worthy and ethical life the same for them as for me? How do we all meet the enormously complex problems of our troubled planet? And what does their culture teach about these questions that my own has neglected? Traveling the world with these queries, I know that we cannot answer these questions without each other's perspectives. The Holy Grail now is coming together as a human family, igniting our full moral imagination such that it lights our way forward, that somehow we find a sense of belonging with each other, no matter how different we might be. These many decades later, the globe has kept its promise made to me upon my birth. I traveled far away from home, and I experienced the miraculous diversity of the human family. Only by unifying what is familiar to me with all that is different have I become whole. And I, too, have kept my promise. I learned this lesson and shared it with the world. As the call to prayer rings out from the majestic Katubia, I send my own prayer that one day our unique differences will be the very thing that unites us.
Thank you. You say, all my life, I have wanted to know how other people understand the world. What was your understanding and what have you learned from that quest?
Mm. Well, maybe I'll give a couple examples, Janice. So maybe we we take an example from the Sahara, which for our listeners today, one of the chapters describes my journey across the Sahara in a camel caravan with Tuareg nomads. And the Tuareg were seminal teachers to me in many, many profound ways. I entered the Sahara shortly after my mother's death. I was only 23 years old, and I was a lost soul. And under the care and the shelter of these indigenous people, and actually what I'm about to say could be true for indigenous peoples all over the world. First of all, uh, I had a teacher called Takama, and she took me under her wing and kind of helped me navigate this experience. And I should say that the Tuareg were a matrilineal society. And now I'm beginning to answer your question, Janice. In every way, shape, and form, men and women were equals. They were absolutely and profoundly equals. The women were the truth tellers, the healers, the griots. They were the ones who led the dances and the poetry and the singing that helped their communities in times of loss and tragedy and famine and all kinds of very, very difficult challenges. And so, first of all, there are other things to say that I learned, but first of all, here I meet a society where men and women are equals, where the women are as highly regarded as the men. The women are using uh, intricate herbal formulas for birth control. They are, the other thing that Takama taught me that would be a lesson that carried through my whole life was that in the most difficult times, her people, the Tuareg, used music and art and storytelling and poetry and any art form to get them through the most difficult times. They also taught me, Janice, all these things were outside the paradigm of my Western um, worldview, if we could use it that way. They also taught me, and this is very important, that as I crossed the Sahara with them, I was a white Western woman, young woman, and I experienced myself outside the Sahara. However, Takama and her people were inside the Sahara Desert. There was not a separation or a distinction between themselves and this extraordinary environment they lived in. There was not a dualistic split between human and earth. And what that did for them, it took me many, many years, I could even say many decades to understand this. Their respect for their environment caused them, inspired them, compelled them to live as equals. human beings as equals in their natural environment. So, as opposed to how most of us have grown up in the West with a split humans over the earth. All of this has led to environmental degradation and destruction. So when we entered parts of the Sahara, because they were indivisible from that landscape, the strict borders between the visible and the invisible disappeared. This is where their mysticism became very apparent to me. Once again, I want to note that what I'm describing is true for many indigenous people in our world. So we come into a portion of the Sahara called the Great Eastern Erg, and there I describe that I enter a kind of Saharian trance where I feel that I could live forever or I could die tomorrow. So the borders between life and death, visible and invisible, are, well, as we say, the veil was very thin. And I learned from the Tuareg. So by now I've mentioned 4 or 5 seminal lessons that changed me forever, that there really isn't a division between what's tangible and intangible. They were open to things that they could see, but also things that they could not see. And the other thing, Janice, I want to say, and then I'll stop my ramble. Um, I had just lost my mother, and what Takaba told me in that mystical realm where the veil was thin, where the borders between the tangible and the intangible had somewhat disappeared. She said, Gail, your mother is available to you all the time. She's left her physical body. Of course, she's died, but in the other realm, she's she's completely available to you. I know, of course, many wisdom traditions teach this, but that was a seminal moment for me. So perhaps, Janice, the Tuareg are a particularly profound example of blasting one out of one's own worldview. But
Mhm.
um, we don't have time, so I won't do this. But I could say similar things in Russia or in China or in Ireland or, you know, India. So
Mhm.
my view, and part of the reason I wrote this book, is that every culture has unique gifts that allow our humanity to blossom more fully.
You refer to your ramble. I want you to ramble one more place in this amazing storytelling that you are sharing with us. Would you take us? Well, I tell you, I mean, ordinarily I would say, would you take us maybe to India? But for the moment, I'm going to ask you, would you take us to Ireland and tell us what
Yes.
it meant to go there?
Yes, I would love to take you to Ireland. For our listeners, my mother's roots on my mother's side, Walsh, are all over County Cork. So I have matriarchal roots there in Ireland. And it's interesting, Janice, maybe you knew this intuitively. You chose Ireland just after the Tuareg. And the Irish also are in a different but similar way to the Tuareg peoples. the Celtic worldview is very non-dualistic, non-hierarchical. And I went to Ireland. I went many, many times over many, many years and took lots of groups. But I'll tell one story that I think is a complement to the story in the Sahara. And I had gone to Ireland with my husband David, and one of our traditions was to go to the sacred sites, the standing stones, the circles, and to call on the wisdom of those ancient Celtic sites and to pray and meditate there. And one of those times, I had a very profound visitation from my mother. This was many, many years after her death. Not surprisingly, her roots are Irish. And she had had a very traumatic experience. This is in the book, so I feel free to describe it on the webinar, where when my sister was born, uh, my mother had a cesarean section, and she had, to save her life, the doctors tied her tubes, a tubal ligation, that caused her to be excommunicated from the Catholic Church. And she was a devout Catholic, and that was a very profound trauma for her. So I was feeling all this during this meditation. And then some days later, I was with the mystic John O'Donohue, who was a colleague and a friend. And John and I were in Connemara, and I was where he lived before he died. And I was describing to him these splits that I felt. Here I was in Ireland, and I was trying to make peace with my Catholic roots and who was I as a spiritual person. And I described to him that um, much of Catholicism was untenable to me because I'm a strong feminist and because of my mother's experience. However, I said to Mr. John O'Donohue, I love the Mother Mary, and I pray the rosary, and I feel close to Mary, and I have this meditation thing going, and then I also feel that a big part of my spirituality is service. And I said, I feel like a superficial American with all these kind of dilettante different parts of my spirituality. And John said to me, he was still a priest at the time. It was before he left the church. He was really more druid than priest. He said, Gail, this is good, all these diverse aspects. It's very Celtic. Now, this is back to my point, Janus. So in the Celtic worldview, it's a both and worldview. It's very non-dualistic. You can welcome your meditation practice. You can welcome your love of the land, your love of service, your love of Mary. Let's put them all together and just like a mandala almost. And so, akin to the Tuaregs, the Celtic, the ancient Celtic worldview helped me resolve a lot of confusion about um, uh, what my spiritual roots as someone raised Catholic meant with who I was then as an adult woman. And I still deeply honor the Celtic worldview, also akin to the Tuaregs, very green, very much uh, humans are not over nature, so we must live in harmony and in respect with the earth.
From the Medina in Marrakesh to the Tuareg to Ireland, um, a quick story of my own from the Medina in Marrakesh, where I was many years ago. And I was in the market, and for me, it was a special experience because both my husband and I, we were together in that market. We were both the first of either of our families to make the return back to Africa from the process of enslavement. So we were really taken with being there. And for people who haven't been there, you walk down the street in Morocco and you see people that you see, African American people that you see in Harlem or in, LA or DC or Detroit. You see Black people. That's not the way the pictures depict them, but that's who you see. And so someone walked up to me and asked me for directions. And I was so taken because it meant somehow I fit in. And then there was a group of children on the side who began laughing hysterically, saying, "She's not this, she American." And I'm saying to the person who was escorting us, crestfallen, "How did they know?" And the person told me they watched your walk. Americans have a different walk. You're accustomed as an American to walking with shoes. People on the continent wear sandals, they slide. And so I
I love this.
and so I tell you that to ask you the question, from the Medina and Marrakesh to the indigenous Tuareg to the indigenous Irish. When you came home, what did you learn about being American?
Yeah, yeah, and that's very important, Janice. That's really, really a very beautiful question. One thing before I do that, I just want to give a shout out to Morocco, one of my favorite places where we did a lot of work. And this is a place where pluralism in every aspect is celebrated. Pluralism, black, white, yellow, brown, Muslim, Hindu, Jewish, Christian. It's a very visionary place and a democracy within the MENA, Middle East and North Africa region. So, just before I answer your good question, I want to give a shout out to Morocco and say how much I love that culture and admire it, and how much hope it gives me. Um, so every time, and I think this is true of all of us who, I'm sure most people on the call today travel. Um, it's interesting. I'm writing a book now called Going Away, Gaining Knowledge, Coming Home. It's the description of an odyssey. So we go away to a different place as whatever culture we come from. We gain knowledge. Uh, we've talked about that a lot already. We gain knowledge mostly from what's different than what we know, and then we come back and we somehow are invited to integrate that knowledge. And every time I came back, and Janice, I've been around the world a lot. I had a rather deep inquiry on what it meant to be an American. I talk about in the book that as global citizens, every one of us, no matter where we live, we have to look at both the positive and negative aspects of our cultural framework. As an American, I have to look at the light and shadow. That's true of everyone, I think. And, I'm saying things that are completely obvious to all of us, but I saw how privileged I was. I saw um, how I began to be aware of how much we take as Americans, our consumption patterns, how much we think we're right, how much there's a lot of arrogance. I talk a lot about that in the Russia chapter, how the Russians, who were deeply inspiring to me, this chapter is during the Gorbachev years when I was blessed to work in Moscow. And the Russians, who I fell madly in love with, um, confronted me on the arrogance of being an American. So I think in China, I learned how our worldview is so young. My Chinese friends had a civilization that was 5,000 years old.
Yes, well,
Their view, their view was telescopic, very, very different than ours. And all of these things, I think what I want to underscore is that it goes back to your original question that was so beautiful. What is compassion? Um, I don't have to agree with another worldview in order to make room inside my heart for it. So there were plenty of worldviews and values and ideas that I did not agree with. However, I learned over time. This is a spiritual practice, obviously. It's not an intellectual practice. I learned over time to allow that view into my heart. There's an example in the book, in the Africa chapter, where friends of mine held the worldview of polygamy. And the story I tell is that this friend of mine, who's an African man, he comes from a lineage of chieftains. And his lineage is that of polygamy. I could never agree with that worldview. However, because I deeply respected this human being, I could find room in, back to your original question, find room in my heart to to understand that that was true for him. I know this sounds a little flaky, but it's very important.
yeah.
It's a kind of, I think maybe we go back to the question that compassion is an exercise where the heart continually expands to include more and more, which doesn't mean agreeing with all that.
As you speak to that, I'm going to do a quick detour, and because we are going through unquestionably a time in which we are seeing the institutionalization globally
Yeah,
of the emblems of what a lack of compassion or a void
correct,
of compassion
correct.
is. Today, September 17th, is the day when a young woman, they say, a journey of 1,000 miles is you have taken many thousands of miles in terms of journeys, but a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And on this day in 1849, a young woman took the step to release herself from the bondage of slavery in the United States. And I remind people that for all the United States' talk of freedom, 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 indigenous people certainly have not benefited. Their freedom was denied and taken away. And for African people and African American people, enslavement in this country went on for 246 years. That should speak for itself. But on that day, she decides to free herself and walk away from enslavement. I have her reward poster that was published on my wall. And that young woman was changed her name after that, and her name became Harriet Tubman, a woman world renowned for not only rescuing herself, but rescuing others. So I want to make note of this being her Escape to Freedom Day and what that really means for us across the board, what that
Mm,
has to do. How do we cultivate that kind of spirit where we
mm,
rescue ourselves and others in these difficult times? How do we cultivate hope? How do we rid ourselves of the need for spectacles of humiliating others? How do we look at resilience? How do we see our own home inside the globe?
mm. Oh, Janice, you always get right to the heart of the matter. Part of why I love you so much. I feel like this image of Harriet Tubman and this one step is the answer, and that you've actually given us a doorway today. That everything she stands for we could learn from. She's her life, her journey, the one step, the story, her story, which many of us know. Um, Within that is all the instruction we need for the times we're living in. And she kept. I know as a distinguished historian, you could say a lot more about this than me. But the obvious takeaways for me is she took one step at a time. She kept standing up for what she knew to be true. She kept humble. She kept others in her view. It was never, her service was never about her. It was about a larger cause. And she also reminds us, at least for me, this is my takeaway from the icon and the symbol and the door that you've offered us. She reminds us to stay strong. It's very easy because the times are difficult and complicated and discouraging and confusing and everything we all know to um, lose our commitment to strength. I think this is a time to be strong. And Harriet Tubman would be an extraordinary example of that, this petite woman who was
Yes.
an unbelievable force of nature. One story from the book that seems a kind of sister to Harriet Tubman. I'll say it quickly because I think that Felipe soon will need us to stop. Um,
Yes.
this will be quick, but I think it echoes Harriet Tubman. So there's a chapter on Jordan in the book where I'm visiting the Syrian refugee camps. And it's up north in Jordan, right on the border of Syria. And they've been using our empowerment work to help them and to give them agency. And they wanted to meet me. So I go into this room. There are 40 Bedouin women sitting on the ground, all in long robes and veiled, very beautiful. And we all know what happened during the Syrian genocide. So um, Most of them had been raped. Many of them had actually witnessed the death of their families with firing squads. And so they told their stories. Of course, all I could do was listen and witness. There was nothing I could do. This is another aspect of compassion. Back to your question, we can't change another's suffering, but we can witness it deeply and hear their stories. And at the end of this time, a woman stood up who had been, before she had to leave Syria, a distinguished professor of literature, and she spoke fluent English. And she said, Gail, when you go back home, we don't want you to tell people the stories of our suffering. They can read that in the newspapers or watch it or whatever. What we want you to tell them, this relates to Harriet Tubman, is that the light of human dignity is within every one of us. That we women in this refugee camp have kept our dignity intact, our respect, our sense of being human. And you must tell the people when you return home that the light will always outshine the dark. And this woman, there's a long line of teachers in my book. They start early in Paraguay and go. This woman, will never encounter her again, obviously. But in that moment, her words changed me forever. And I come back to her words a lot these days. Um, in the book, it's described many people, including the women born into brothels, who in India, where we did work, who were forced into marriage at 10. All of them said to me, that's not the story we want you to tell. We want you to tell the story of human strength, of how we stay resilient, how we stay hopeful, how we remember that in solidarity with one another, we're capable of far more than we believe. And Harriet Tubman is an astounding example of that.
We began talking about collecting the world's words, and Gail, you have brought us the spirit behind those words. Thank you so much. I see that we have questions, and so I'm going to start with just one that's on my screen. I don't know if Felipe wants to read some, uh, but I see that, hold on. I see that someone has said, Dear Gail, I truly enjoyed Home Inside the Globe, reading about your stories. This is from Carlos Ordonez, or I'm
Wow.
sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, but Carlos Ordonez. Um, and he says, I truly enjoyed Home Inside the Globe, reading about your stories and learnings from so many different cultures. I was struck by how many of those worldviews resonate with the wisdom of our First Nations. My question is, have you ever considered or would you be interested in engaging in similar cultural immersion with indigenous communities here to explore those parallels deeply? Thank you for that, Carlos.
Wow. Hi, Carlos. Actually, Carlos, yes, I would, but Dr. Janus Adams is already involved in this. So, Carlos and Janice, you two need to talk
All
because
right.
uh, true, Janice, right? Yes, Carlos, that's always intrigued me, but maybe you'll write a book about that. And I do know that Janus has explored those kinds of things very deeply.
Thank you for that, Gail. I mean, it's the spirit in one person reaching out to another, and it's a gift when that comes to us. Ruth Brody or Brody Sharon, she says more and more people travel outside of their own countries today, so one would think that we would find better ways to get along. Yet the wars continue and enmity between neighboring countries has not diminished. Ukraine and Russia, Israel and Palestine, North and South Sudan. So, what do you think is the key to our achieving peace among nations? What is missing in our consciousness to achieve that?
Ooh, wow. That's quite a question. What was the questioner's name again, Janice?
Sharon is the last name.
Ruth.
Ruth.
Ruth Sharon.
Ruth, yeah. Thank you, Ruth. Well, interestingly, maybe you know this, Ruth. I don't think I know you, but maybe I do. My husband, David Gershon, is uh, involved in a very large peace initiative called Peace on Earth 2030, and he's that's his passion and his dharma and what he spends all day long working on. And one of the things that I think you can visit that website. There's a lot of ways to get engaged. Peace on Earth 2030. But one of the things that that work is about is the very questions that Janice has been focused on today, that the um, growth of the evolution of consciousness is perhaps our greatest hope. As individuals, as we become more aware, more awake, more compassionate, more able to hold difference and not necessarily agree with it. I think our great hope now, as many of us have landed on, at least here in this country, is within our local communities and the action that's local that ensures that the quality of life and the freedoms that we all um, um, need to protect, that we're doing what we can to do that. So I think that I'm answering you more on an individual level, on a personal level, that what we each do um, throughout the day counts a lot. How we interact with our families, our partners, our communities, um, everything the Charter for Compassion stands for is what we need.
Felipe, do you have questions that I can't see?
Well, yes, there's only one more, but I just wanted to take the time to thank you both for such a rich and inspiring conversation. What a joy to be able to not only identify that we all provide such knowledge in our own different cultures, but we can learn from each other. And also the role that privilege takes, when we're able to like take that trip and get to know that culture. So many people are not able to do that. And so recognizing that is also very powerful. And I really appreciate that, Gail. The last question that we wanted to close with before I take over and give some announcements, this comes from Pam Ryan, and she says, Gail, what keeps you motivated to continuously seek compassion?
Hello, Pam. Hi, Pam. How are you? Wow, that's a great question. What motivates me to continue to seek deeper compassion? That was it? Yes, Felipe?
Yes, correct.
Um, you know, there's Pam, I know you know this. There hundreds of opportunities every day. Um, I think that um, we're all, it's interesting. This is kind of maybe a Celtic thing. It's when we recognize each other's suffering that, to me anyway, this is how I experience it, that my compassion awakens the most. So throughout the day, it can be anywhere, anytime, in any place. Um, the human family all around me is getting on as best they can, called the human condition. And there are good days and bad days, and even a bad morning turns to a good afternoon or something like that. But when I recognize another's suffering, their struggle, their challenge, I think when I really recognize it, when I don't push it away, when I see that their suffering awakens my heart, and even my suffering awakens their heart, then something is happening. So for me, we're in a time of great suffering, but I notice in myself that not every day, but some days, because the depth of suffering around me is quite acute, I notice I'm getting more compassionate if I don't push it away. So of course it's the opposite of our first human response. Instead of pushing the suffering away, I bring it towards me. It connects me with that person or that situation, and my heart has opened more. So we're all the way back to Janus's wonderful first question about how does compassion deepen. Thank you, Pam, for that question.
Yes, thank you, Pam. Thank you for everyone that asked questions, but most importantly, thank you to both you, Gail and Janice, for taking us on this journey for an hour. What a privilege to be able to hear from you, to learn from you, and to feel the inspiration that has come from this conversation. For everybody else that is watching, this is being recorded and will be posted on our Charter for Compassion YouTube channel. Since you registered, you will be receiving an email with that link so that you can later watch this again if you would like to. And with that, let me just share my screen so we can go on with some of the announcements that we have, because there is plenty going on at the Charter for Compassion. So if you're looking for opportunities to, put that compassion to work or to gain more compassion and self-compassion, pay attention to this. So tomorrow, EdNet Forum, we have the New World Game with Milagro Gable, and this is at 7:30 a.m. Pacific time. We also have the Australian National Day of Compassion. Their theme this year is Compassion in Action, and this happens on September 21st, but since it's in Australia, September 20th for us in the afternoon, Saturday. You're welcome to check that out on our website. Also in Monterrey, Mexico, on September 26th and 27th, we have Encuentro Mundial de Valores. Super excited for that conference, and the Charter for Compassion is always active there. And I was there last year and I had a blast and learned so much about the Nobel laureates that were there during that year. We also have every Wednesday the Harmony of Humanity webinar series with our executive director, Marilyn Turkovich. She takes you on a journey through music and history and gives you and shows you that common thread that is between all humanity, no matter what time or culture. That's every Wednesday at 8 a.m. and it goes through December. We also have the kitchen table chat for anyone that is concerned about the healthcare sector or would like to propose ideas or initiatives every first Friday of the month at 8:30 a.m. Pacific time. We meet, so next time is on October 3rd. We also have courses, Catalyzing Healthy Cultural Transformation. This is a 6-week course every Tuesday from September 9th to October 28th. We just consulted, and if you would like to join, even though September 9th already happened and this second session just happened yesterday, you're still able to join. So check out the website, check out our website, and that has information there. And then our remaining global reads for the year, we have Everything is a Story on October 15th, Discovering the Spiritual Wisdom of Trees, Wednesday, November 12th, and finally Water on December 10th. And you can, again, learn more about all this in our website. We have our youth conference happening on October 28th through 30th, and then community chats. So if you are in Canada, California, the US in general, or the UK in general, there are all these dates during September and October where we focus our conversations in those geographic areas and see how can we be of help promoting or providing any sort of support in your initiatives. Last but not least, we have the Charter Sangha, and it's a moment for meditation that we have every last Saturday of the month, September 27th at 9 a.m. Pacific. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us once again. You can always reach out to us via email, contact@charterforcompassion.org, and you will be able to, and the links on our YouTube channel, they will be all there so you can access everything that we've been discussing during this webinar. Thank you once again, Gail. Thank you once again, Janice. Thank you once again, everyone.
Thank you,
Viewer here.
Felipe. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Felipe.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank
And we'll be
you.
seeing you soon.